Mr. President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and international community. With great surprise, the Colombian people observed the Nobel Peace Prize being granted to the current president of the Colombians. We ask ourselves, should the Nobel Peace Prize be given to someone who, far from building peace, has been divided as never before in the midst of the worst terrorist threat, strengthened by the Habana negotiations? Will the international community not ask, are they suitable guarantors of a peace agreement in Colombia who lead the Cuban and Venezuelan tyranny and who in their wake have only left murders, hunger and destruction? I would like to tell you that according to an article published in Transparency International Chapter Colombia, corruption in recent years during the Santos government has become an endemic, systemic and structural problem which not only has economic effects but can jeopardize institutionalization and governance. Never before in our history had the current level of corruption been experienced in the country. The fiscal gap is $7 billion in the hands of an indolent government that buys congressmen, court magistrates, and control entities like the former Attorney General of the nation. I want to tell you that in the hands of Santos, entire municipalities like Jurado in the department of Chocó had been displaced by hunger. Hundreds of children died in the department of La Guajira, results of government indolence. Cocaine crops have reached the historical ceiling by industrial quantities, and paradoxically, the areas where the cocaine cultivation, processing, and distribution are the same so-called peasant reserve zones of the Habana agreements. That is, agreements used not to enforce the Farc narco-terrorist group's institutionality, but to legalize the criminal activity that today continues to grow. Recall that the Latin American stream left the oil financing from Venezuela came to an end, but now desperately want to legalize from Colombia in the hands of our Nobel of Peace, drug trafficking. It is the only formula to continue supporting Cuba, Venezuela, and the other perfidious and criminal governments. You will remember that when Nicaragua attacked the sovereignty of our country, trying to steal the island of San Andres, the FARC applauded and congratulated Daniel Ortega for his feat. They all work in a coordinated way, Mr. President of the United States and the international community. Latin America communism is a reality that buried Cuba in misery, crushed Venezuela's economy, and now, in the hands of our Nobel Peace, with a structural tax reform that he is working to have approved quickly, will end the middle class and will lead to country in misery that may never have been seen in history. Mr. President of the United States and the international community, the great works of our Peace Nobel had been to support of the Cuban regime, subsidized with Colombian budget with the excuse that they are the host of the peace process, the permissiveness with a criminal regime of Venezuela who has protected the FARC since Chavez was in power, and Santos international lobbying seeking approval from a naive international community of his so-called peace treaty, which our international visitors have never read, but wrongly believe that they, FARC, will lead the weapons for votes in wonderful, how ingenious. The international lobby of Santos to get the Nobel Prize with public resources have our country in the misery, the oldest democracy of the region in the hands of criminals who only think to usufruct the national budget as it were money out of their own pocket. It is estimated that this Nobel Peace has cost the Colombians $3.5 billion. The Obama administration has been permissive to all the crimes that occur in its neighborhood, putting at the risk all of Latin America and the Caribbean, and of course the American people. the crisis of the missiles is little compared to achievements of the current Latin America regimes of the extreme left amid announcements of peace, cocktails, and photographs in fashion magazines have allowed. We call on your government that begins in a few days and the whole international community to make an in-depth analysis of the reasons why the prize was given without having achieved peace, but successfully created the worst institutional crisis in our history. We ask you to act immediately. Every day that passes will be worse for the region. As the executive director of the Movement of Secular Catholic of Colombia, Solidarity, I affirm that Colombia is not the corruption that is in the government. Colombia is of the Colombians, not of treaties and ideologies unveiled and surpassed by the effort of generations that have sought God from human fragility, but strengthened by the fire of heaven, which is His Holy Spirit, to face this darkness that will never defeat us. Mr. President Donald Trump and the international community, we await your response.